stand in the Piazza dei Miracoli and watch the tourists, arms out, palms up, pretending to hold up the tower behind them. It makes a great photo. It also hides the truth. This is not a quirky postcard. It is a structural emergency over 800 years old that nobody ever solved, only stopped from getting worse. In 1990, officials closed it, certain it would fall. Engineers spent a decade and over 30 million euros freezing the ground, stacking lead, drilling soil from beneath. One attempt made the lean worse overnight. They found something that worked. They never straightened it. Now look closer, past the crowd. The tower is wired. There are sensors in the masonry, instruments at the base, monitoring lines. Most visitors never notice and never photograph. Every shift is logged. Every season is measured against the last. That is the first thing nobody tells you. The Leaning Tower of Pisa was never fixed. It was stopped from getting worse at a cost north of 30 million euros over roughly a decade of closure using methods that failed badly the first times they were tried. The lean you came to see is not a charming accident. It is a slow emergency that has been managed, not cured. The numbers are not gentle. By 1990, the tilt had reached about 5 degrees, and engineers warned that the tower's centre of gravity was creeping toward the edge of its own base. That is the line. Cross it, and a structure falls. They closed the tower completely. For the first time in centuries, the most famous building in Pisa was deemed too dangerous to stand under. And here is the part that should stop you. This thing started failing before it was half built. Pisa, the name itself, comes from a word for marshy land. The tower sits on soft alluvial soil near a riverbank, ground that was never going to hold a heavy stone tower straight. The builders found this out early. The tower began to lean after only 3 of its eventual 8 stories were finished. The building told them in the clearest possible language that it was a mistake. They kept building anyway. Instead of stopping, the builders adjusted. As they added floors over the following stages, construction stretched across nearly 200 years. They shaped the upper levels to lean back against the tilt, curving the tower slightly like a banana. It was clever, but notice what that fix actually did. It did not address the soil. It did not stop the sinking. It bought room to keep leaning. The workaround for the floor became a permanent, irreversible part of the tower's shape. The scar is the silhouette itself. For most of its life, the gamble looked like it had paid off. It was meant to be a proud bell tower, built to stand straight. It refused to. And somewhere along the way, the failure became the attraction. The lean was the brand. And underneath the postcard, the ground kept doing what soft ground does, slowly, quietly, for centuries. The first real intervention was crude, and it was hidden. Engineers wrapped a concrete ring around the base and stacked roughly 600 tons of lead ingots on the north side as a counterweight. It was ugly. It was the opposite of what you want tourists to see beneath a UNESCO landmark, but it worked. For the first time in the tower's recorded history, the lean moved in the right direction. Barely, temporarily, enough to buy time. In 1995, the commission went looking for something cleaner, something invisible. The plan was to replace the visible counterweights with an anchored cable system. To install it, they needed to freeze the ground. So, they froze it. And when the freezing stopped, the tower lurched. It began leaning south again, and the wrong way, at a rate of about 4 arc seconds a day. They named the episode Black September, and they shut it down immediately. Sit with that. The second attempt by the best people available did not just stall, it actively made the tower worse fast. The deeper problem was that every fix a normal engineer reaches for first was off the table. Underpinning the foundation, grouting the soil, propping the structure. The standard moves all carried unacceptable risk. and preservation rules required the tower's essential character to be kept intact, which ruled out visible bracing and supports. You could not strap it. You could not openly prop it. The cure could trigger the collapse. So the only path left was the hardest and least visible one. Reach under the building and manipulate the soil itself, blind. Engineers drilled in at an angle and carefully removed small amounts of earth from beneath the north side so the tower could settle gently back toward upright under its own weight. Drains were added to manage the groundwater. The works wrapped up in 2001. The full project reduced the tilt by about 15 inches, recovering just over 50 centimetres of lean. Now read that number the right way. 50 centimetres out of centuries of accumulated tilt. They did not straighten the tower. They returned it to roughly the lean it had 200 years earlier. A lean that was, itself, already a problem. The best outcome anyone would accept was to rewind the clock to an earlier version of the same defect. In 2005, an assessment declared the tower safe for the next 300 years. In 2018, it recorded its first self-correction. By some accounts, it now shows no measurable movement at all. By others, it still shifts about 0.02 of an inch every year. Those claims do not fully agree. And that disagreement is the point. Safe for 300 years is a forecast, and it sits on the exact ground that has been outlasting forecasts since before the building was finished. Here is the cleanest, strangest truth in the whole story. None of it was ever aimed at making the tower straight. It was aimed at the opposite. The entire effort exists to keep the lean, the flaw, the very defect that nearly destroyed the building, from ever getting bad enough to finish the job. Straighten the tower, and you erase the only reason anyone has ever cared about it. The lean is the product. The lean is the revenue. The lean is why this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site instead of one more old bell tower, so they protect the defect forever. Walk back out into the piazza and watch the tourists again. Arms out, palms up, grinning, pretending to hold the tower upright for the camera. They think they are posing with a joke. They are posing with an unsolved problem, held in place by a quiet, permanent operation of sensors and drains and people who measure a building by the 100th of an inch, all working to preserve the one thing wrong with it. Building something straight is hard. Keeping something crooked exactly as crooked as it needs to be for 300 more years, on ground that will not stop moving, that is the part nobody finished. They just agreed to keep paying for it, and the tower keeps leaning on purpose into a future nobody is willing to guarantee.